Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another Supercoach Insider podcast. My name is Swiz, here to talk all things round 14 for my team. As always, check us out on all our social media platforms, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, TikTok, and Twitter, Supercoach Insider 100 or Swiz26 to get in contact with us. All right, round 13 first, so I ended up scoring a 21.86. Players that I brought in were Brayshaw and Neil. A little bit disappointing because obviously I had vice-captain with those two. Would have been very nice to have sort of Laird and Dunkley. I think if I had Laird captain, I'd be ranked up the same as Chris right now. So slight disappointment again with the captain choices, but overall pretty happy with my score. Took Johnson's 96. I think I ended up having 22 players. So people like Goulden 62 dropped out. Tom Green 77. So it was very handy where there was players with very high ownership that I didn't have to take their scores. So that's put me up to 791 overall. I think I'm about 600 points outside the top 10. We keep talking, just little things each week, captain decisions, vice-captain decisions, rookie roulette, and definitely could have been challenging for a top score, but top place for the season. But that's just the way it goes sometimes. And I'll give you a bit of an apology here. Obviously, I'm not sounding great. I'm just dealing with a bit of cold and flu at the moment. Into my side, round 14. Now, the big one is Sicily and what to do with him. The frustrating thing for all us super coaches is he is going to appeal, or Hawthorn are going to appeal his suspension, and that is on Monday. So that is actually after this round. So he was the one I was originally going to trade straight to Stewart. However, with the chance that he could get off, I'm going to hold fat and keep him in there, and it's Weddle that is going to become Stewart. So I'm only making the one trade this week. And that's because if you look at my team, as much as I love a few extra players in there, round 14 buy situation, I've got all my forwards playing, all my two rucks, well actually three with Briggs, but my two rucks on field, and my 8 midfielders. So that's 16 players just there, and then as long as Cincotta gets named, Cincotta, Stewart, Sinclair, I'm looking at 19 playing this week, so I'm reasonably happy with that. Yeah, in a perfect world, I'd love maybe another player, and did consider maybe going Sicily to become Anderson or Lloyd, which would give me 20, and it would also give me enough players for next week. However, I'm going to sit tight with that, and I think with a lot of people, as much as the Sicily trade out move was the right thing to do, now that the appeal is going to be Monday, there'd be nothing worse than him winning that appeal, which I think is unlikely. But if he was to win that appeal and get off, it's going to be very frustrating not to have probably the best defender in Supercoach not in your team, and really trading. And as you can see there, I don't really need him playing this week. He was going to miss with the bye anyway. I've got the 19, so the only real difference would be maybe bringing in, say, a Lloyd, or as I said, an Anderson into that midfield, and that would makes a little bit more cash because Sicily is pretty close to max price. He actually has a pretty good break even, but you can nearly make 100 to 150 with a trade of his there, and then then I would have potentially more points on the field. So maybe a Cincotta or a Ford or somebody's score like that gets cycled out. And obviously he'll give me a better score for this week. And then the player that I bring in, be it one of those round 12 or 13 players, would set up my team better for next week. But as I said, it's if Sicily still gets the 3, then I can look at my options for next week. And there are some better options to bring in. The round 12, we've looked at Sarong, but as much as he's been named to play, he's struggling with that ankle injury. Anderson's scores have been a bit up and down. Jake Lloyd, who I still like, he does have some up and down scores this season as well. Where next week, we've got now the Essendon Adelaide players, which I've already got all of them, so I don't really need them. It's probably the only two that really interest me is Collingwood and Melbourne. And Melbourne being Oliver and Petrarca. So yeah, if Sicily was still to be out, I've got that option to turn Sicily into one of those players, which would finish my midfield. So if I look at my team at the moment, Sicily, Dacos, Stewart, Dawson, Sinclair, and Day. In a perfect world, I want to try and get Will Day as that loophole player. But yeah, he's fine there at D6. Bont, Brayshaw, Neil, Green, Wines, with Laird and Merritt. I need that one more midfielder. So it's either getting the value of somebody like a Mills or an LDU, maybe even if Walsh keeps dropping, or it's looking at the player that's coming in next week, which will be hopefully Kyrie coming back or Petrarca. That's if Sicily was to fell his appeal. And then the Ruck's pretty straightforward. English, Marshall, Briggs. A few people have been messaging me about, should we look at trading up Briggs this week? No. He's going to make 50k. English has got a pretty good break even as well. And I've said, I've been toying with the idea that potentially trade out English, but he's obviously the number one ruck, and Briggs would have to do something special this week, and English would have to probably put up a poor score, which I don't think is going to happen, for me to consider that option. But at 600k, there's a lot that you could probably do with English's money, and again, people are looking at how to get Clary in. So that is a potential move there for me, but it's looking at Briggs and turning him into Darcy Cameron. And then, and with that would put Darcy Cameron as my F6 with Dunkley, Taranto, Rosie, Gordon and Canelio as my other premium forwards. So if Sicily wasn't to fell, if Sicily was successful with his tribunal, then, I'd have all lines covered except for M8. And then it'd be the following week. I'd be looking at maybe Humphrey, Johnson, trading one down, one up to turn Humphrey into a premium midfielder. So that's just kind of a little bit of forward thinking on my team. And the hard thing is the following week with the round 15. So as you can see there, Sicily's the big one. So if he gets off, that'll obviously help tremendously. If he doesn't, then he will have to become a trade out. I will have a full defence for next week. It's just the forward line which will be the bigger issue. Briggs becomes Darcy Cameron, so that at least gives me potentially 2 rucks or even 3 forwards, depending on how where I want to put Cameron that week. Obviously, I'll have Madden, so that's where Darcy Cameron's appeal comes in, because he'll be able to cover English or Marshall if they get a 1-week injury. I'll have 2 forwards, Marshall plus Darcy Cameron, so that's 4 there. 6 defenders, which will be 10. But then it's with Brayshaw, Neil, Humphrey, and Johnson. That's 14. Laird and Merritt, and potentially Chester is only 17. So next week I'll be looking at potentially Eddie Ford is the one, Chin Cotter as well, so I can get up to that sort of 18, 19 players. And realistically, we only need a best 18. But in a perfect world like last week where we had best 22, definitely helps drop those low scores out. So at the minimum, I would like 19, potentially 20 if I could, somehow get to that. So that's the plan going forward. So hopefully, with the 19 this week, and then we'll just wait and see with Sicily. And that's been the big question. I know a lot of people have been already looking at trading him out. And I've got no problem with the move. It's just the question now is what you do if he was to be successful. Which and if you roll the dice and he doesn't get off, well, you're going to obviously be points ahead. Now, the thing is, if we look back at my round 14 setup, if Sicily was to... Well, Sicily, if I was to say swap Sicily like a few people are, let's just say it's Lloyd, and Lloyd comes out and gets 100, well, all that'll mean is maybe a Chin Cotter or a Ford, their score gets taken out. But if they come out and score like a 60 or 70 anyway, which, it's not out of the question, especially Ford's been putting up some good numbers, you're only getting like 20 or 30 points. And that was the big thing last week. Like I was talking to Chris and Ben about Ben Keys, who did very well. 115. However, all that would have mean is I think my next person to drop out last week, I had Wardlaw on the bench, so it would have been actually Dawson. So Dawson gets dropped out. I would have got Ben Keys to score, and would have actually only got 20 points from that too. So that's the thing. Like, yeah, a few people are like, yes, but if you only had 17 or 18, yes, Ben Keys would have been awesome for you. But if you're in that position where you actually have plenty of others, all it means is your bottom score gets dropped out. And if you're like in that situation where I was last week, where you had all these players scoring 90, well, that trade would have not actually been that beneficial for you. So definitely a bit of food for thought when you're actually making these trades to go, well, it is best 18. Is the player that I'm trading out and is the player trading in actually going to really help my point generation going forward? Now, if you are in that position, as I've said, where you only have 16, 17 and you need to get to 18, well, that's a whole different story to somebody who's already got 19 or 20 players. In regards to a vice captain and captaincies this week, as much as some of my decisions haven't been completely great with this, Stewart and Rosie and Butters, for those people needing the Thursday night game, which we've got plenty of players to loophole, because you can use any of the players that are missing this week as your captain. But I really like tomorrow night, the two Brisbane boys. I feel like Neil should bounce back, but I'm going to back in Dunkley. He's actually put up some really good scores, and he's just getting no attention, which is really interesting. Like, at some point you're going to think, well, they're going to have to put some work into Dunkley. Can't just let him do what he wants to do. But last week, it kind of paid off. Like, it's shown when Neil doesn't score well, Brisbane do struggle. So with Dunkley, his last, since Carlton, which was round 8, he's gone 149, 103, 153, 146 and 148. So probably should have jumped on him last week. But I thought Lachie Neale against the Hawks would have a good game, but it obviously didn't pan out that way. So he is my vice captain, and then my captain is Bontempelli against North Melbourne. It's I think he's projected for something ridiculous, so that ridiculously low, 97. There's no way he's going 97. Surely the Bont, and more importantly, the Dogs do a bit of a number on North this week. Though in saying that, there's been quite a few upsets in footy recently. I don't think that'll be an upset, but yeah, who knows? Because who would have thought last week that we would have been in a situation where Hawthorn beating Brisbane and Richmond beating Fremantle, and even a lot of people were pretty confident on the Pies beating the D's, but especially, well, it's funny because a lot of people are saying with the Pies are the D's outs, but though the Pies did actually have some important players out as well. So, but most people were backing in the Pies for that one. So, yeah, it's hard to get a kind of read on some of these games. There seems to be an upset or two every week, which is good for footy. But yeah, naturally, it's not great for our Supercoach scoring. A couple of questions that people have had, which doesn't affect my side, but I know it affects people that you're looking in. So some people saying, maybe do I bring in Josh Sin? So I only had that one sub score. We did know they were looking at him pre-season until he had that injury. So I think he'll be a decent rookie. The only problem is with him, he's a wingman. He's going to, get plenty of game time now. Excuse me. As I continue to bat this flu, yeah. The problem with it was last week he was subbed off, so there is potential where he could be subbed off again. But excuse me. But there is actually no real other rookies like that. So the hope is that he actually second game performs a lot better. So he's probably the obvious this week, but I actually think probably West Coast's Marriage, unless you need a player this week, maybe going early on him, 102k, if that helps you get your trades done. And I know a few people are looking at that. The hard thing with Sin is he does have the bye next week, so you've got to be mindful that this doesn't stuff your teams. And that's the other thing with people asking me about Harry Himmelberg and even Taron Thomas. Both of them have their bye coming up next week, so as much as both of them should be under some consideration for your teams. It's just hard to do unless you're in that situation where you were to have lots of players playing next week. But I think a lot of people are struggling for full teams next week. So it maybe wait a week or two before you look at those players. Fife, the 96 was great. Amira comes back in, so that will, reduce some of his centre bounce tendencies. But for his price at $275, he is a solid option, and he has already had his buy, so I can understand why people are looking at him, and well done to those people who jumped on him last week. So I've got no problems with people looking at that, because that does solve some issues for people's buy rounds. Sarong's another one that I've been asked about it quite a bit, but yeah, as I said earlier, the ankle injuries probably got me worried about that one. So, and he's got a quite large break even, so I would probably hold off another week, and he might be the best option if you were to hold Sicily, that you could look at going Sicily to Sarong the following week, just get another week's of data on that. So yeah, that's just some thoughts about some potential other trade-ins that people are looking at. I know a few people have got Mitchell, Weddle, and JVR as well. So definitely players that you should be looking at moving on this week. So yeah, and that's where we were talking about. But Marriage might be a good person there for JVR to go down to, and that would allow you to get, say, Seamus Mitchell or Weddle up to a premium player. So that's a bit of food for thought with that as well. Outside of that, good luck with your super coaching on the weekend, and we will see you next week. Bye.